Captain Sarah Chen stared at the holographic message that had been broadcasting across every human colony for the past 72 hours. The alien figure stood 12 feet tall, its crystalline exoskeleton catching light like a prism, forearms gesturing with mechanical precision. When it spoke, its voice resonated through universal translators with the weight of absolute authority. "Primitive species designated human," the creature intoned. "You have ventured too far from your origin world. The Galactic Dominion has observed your expansion with growing concern. Your aggressive tendencies and unpredictable nature pose a threat to the established order that has maintained peace for 10,000 years." Sarah had watched this message dozens of times now, but the next part still made her blood boil. "By decree of the High Assembly, all human vessels must return to your birth system immediately. Any craft found beyond the boundary of what you call the Sol system after 30 standard rotations will be destroyed without warning. This is not negotiation. This is instruction. Comply, or face consequences your species cannot comprehend." The message ended with coordinates marking the boundary, a sphere encompassing just beyond Pluto's orbit. Everything humanity had built in the past century, 17 colonies, 6 mining operations, 2 research stations, all of it was supposed to be abandoned. Sarah powered down the display and looked around the bridge of the UES Defiance. Her crew of 43 represented the best of humanity's space fleet. They'd volunteered for this mission, knowing they might never return home. But the fire in their eyes told her everything she needed to know about humanity's response to the Dominion's ultimatum. "Status report," she called to her tactical officer. Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez pulled up a 3-dimensional map of local space. 17 more ships arrived in the past 6 hours. "Captain, the fleet now stands at 412 vessels of various classes. Admiral Harrison's flagship, the Indomitable, hold position at the fleet center." Sarah nodded. 400 ships wasn't much compared to what intelligence suggested the Dominion could field. Estimates put their local forces at over 10,000 vessels, each one reportedly superior to humanity's best technology. But humans had never been ones to back down from a fight simply because the odds were impossible. "Communications. Patch me through to the Admiral." Admiral James Harrison appeared on screen moments later. His weathered face bore the scars of humanity's early expansion conflicts, and his gray eyes held the steady resolve of someone who'd made peace with dying for principle. "Captain Chen," he said, "I trust you reviewed our tactical assessment." "Yes, sir. The Dominion's closest fleet elements are positioned 3 light-years from here. Their scout ships have been monitoring our build-up but maintaining distance. No hostile action yet." "Good. Because in 18 hours, we're going to give them something they've never seen before, a species that doesn't know when to quit." Sarah felt a familiar thrill run through her. Humanity had always been at its best when someone told them something was impossible. When the Dominion had broadcast their ultimatum, expecting immediate compliance, they'd fundamentally misunderstood human nature. Instead of retreat, Colony World had emptied their defense fleets. Independent traders had armed their cargo haulers. Even civilian vessels had volunteered to join the response fleet. The plan was audacious in its simplicity. Rather than wait for the Dominion to enforce their ultimatum, humanity would strike first. Intelligence suggested the Dominion had never faced serious resistance. For 10 millennia, they'd maintained control through overwhelming technological superiority and the threat of annihilation. Species simply submitted rather than face extinction. But humans were different. They'd spent their entire evolutionary history fighting impossible odds and somehow surviving. When faced with saber-toothed tigers, they'd invented space. When confronted by ice ages, they'd discovered fire. When told the sound barrier couldn't be broken, they'd built faster jets. When informed that space travel was a fantasy, they'd walked on the moon. The Dominion had made a critical error in judgment. They'd assumed humanity would react like every other species they'd encountered, with rational fear and immediate submission. Instead, they'd united humanity like nothing else could have. Every political faction, every corporate interest, every colonial government had suddenly found common cause. The message had been clear. No one tells humans where they can and cannot go. "Captain," her communications officer called out, "incoming transmission from Dominion forces. It's addressed to the entire fleet." "Put it through." The same crystalline figure appeared, but this time Sarah could see dozens of similar beings in the background. The setting looked like a command center of some kind, with holographic displays showing the human fleet in perfect detail. Human vessels, the alien said, "You have ignored our directive. We detect 412 craft in formation beyond your designated boundary. This represents a clear violation of Dominion law. You have one final opportunity to withdraw. Failure to comply will result in the complete destruction of your fleet and immediate retaliation against your colony worlds." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Sarah looked around at her crew. Every face showed the same mixture of fear and determination. They all knew what was coming next. Humanity's first real test among the stars wouldn't be about exploration or diplomacy. It would be about proving that some things were worth fighting for, regardless of the cost. "All stations, prepare for combat operations," she ordered, "and send a message to the Dominion fleet." "What should it say, Captain?" Sarah smiled grimly. "Tell them we got their message. And tell them humanity's response is simple. Try us." The Dominion's response came 6 hours later in the form of a perfectly coordinated fleet that seemed to materialize out of nowhere. Sarah watched her tactical display with growing unease as enemy contacts multiplied across the screen. Ships appeared in precise formations, their hulls gleaming like black metal in strange geometries that hurt to look at directly. "Jesus Christ," Rodriguez whispered. "Captain, I'm reading over 8,000 contacts. They are not just bigger than our ships, they're impossible. Some of those vessels are showing mass readings equivalent to small moons." Admiral Harrison's voice crackled across the fleet channel. "All vessels, maintain formation. Do not engage until my direct order." We knew this was coming. Sarah studied the enemy formation with professional interest despite her fear. The Dominion fleet had arranged itself in a perfect sphere surrounding the human forces. Each enemy vessel maintained exact distances from its neighbors, creating an unbreakable geometric pattern. It was beautiful, terrifying, and utterly alien in its precision. "Captain," her science officer called out, "I'm detecting massive energy buildups across their fleet. Whatever they are powering up, it's beyond anything in our database." The same crystalline being appeared on screen again, but this time he wasn't alone. Behind him stood dozens of other aliens, some reptilian, others appearing almost gaseous, a few that looked like living metal. Sarah realized she was seeing representatives of the species that comprised the Dominion's empire. "Humans," the lead figure said, "you face a combined might of 47 species that have known peace under Dominion rule for millennia. Our technology is refined across epochs your civilization cannot imagine. Our weapons can unmake stars. Our shields can withstand the collapse of reality itself. This is your final warning." The transmission cut to show the human fleet from an external perspective. Sarah's breath caught as she realized how utterly outmatched they appeared. The Dominion vessels dwarfed even humanity's largest battleships. Some of the enemy craft were so massive they generated their own gravitational fields, bending space around them in visible distortions. But then something unexpected happened. Admiral Harrison's voice came across the fleet channel, calm and steady as always. "All ships, I want you to remember why we're here. Not because we think we can win a conventional engagement with these forces. We're here because someone needs to show the galaxy that there are still species willing to fight for freedom. The Dominion has ruled through fear for 10,000 years. Today, we teach them what happens when they threaten the wrong people." Sarah felt her crew straighten around her. The Admiral was right. This wasn't about winning. It was about making a statement that would echo across the galaxy long after they were gone. "Execute Protocol 7. Harrison continued. Sarah's heart raced. Protocol 7 was humanity's most desperate gambit, developed in the months following the Dominion's ultimatum. If conventional weapons couldn't pierce their defenses, humanity would rely on the one advantage it always possessed: complete unpredictability. Every human ship began launching what appeared to be standard escape pods. To the Dominion sensors, they probably looked like a panicked evacuation. In reality, each pod contained a small crew in humanity's most experimental technology, devices that barely worked in testing and had never been used in combat. "Sir," Rodriguez reported, launching complete. 2,000 pods deployed across the engagement zone. The Dominion fleet responded exactly as human tacticians had hoped. Rather than destroying the pods immediately, they began systematically capturing them, probably intending to take prisoners for interrogation. It was a logical response from a species accustomed to enemies who fought conventionally. Phase 2, Admiral Harrison commanded. The captured pods activated simultaneously. Instead of weapons or explosives, they released clouds of what looked like metallic dust. The substance spread rapidly through space, coating Dominion vessels in a thin film that seemed harmless enough. Sarah watched the display of confusion ripple through the enemy formation. Dominion ships began scanning the metallic particles, trying to determine their purpose. Some vessels moved to decontaminate their hulls, while others maintained position, apparently unconcerned. "Captain," her science officer said quietly, "the nanites are reporting successful infiltration of 42% of enemy vessels." Sarah nodded grimly. The metallic dust wasn't a weapon in any conventional sense. Each particle was a microscopic robot program with one simple task: learn everything possible about Dominion technology and transmit that information back to the human fleet. The Dominion had made another critical error. They assumed humanity would fight like every other species they'd encountered, with honor, following established rules of engagement, using predictable tactics. Instead, humanity had essentially cheated, using technology so primitive and crude that the Dominion's sophisticated defenses couldn't even recognize it as a threat. "Data stream incoming," Rodriguez reported. "We're getting detailed schematics of their shield systems, weapon configurations, even internal ship layouts. This is incredible intelligence." But the Dominion forces were learning too. Suddenly, energy signatures across their fleet spiked dramatically. All vessels, evasive maneuvers. Admiral Harrison shouted. The first wave of Dominion weapons fire lit up space like the birth of stars. Beams of coherent energy that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously tore through the void where human ships had been moments before. The few vessels that couldn't dodge in time simply ceased to exist, not destroyed so much as erased from reality. "Return fire," Harrison commanded. "Target their primary command vessels." Humanity's response was everything the Dominion hadn't expected. Instead of coordinated volleys from major weapons, every human ship opened fire with every system they possessed. Missiles, energy beams, kinetic projectiles, experimental weapons that violated several laws of physics, and devices that were more properly science experiments than military hardware. The barrage was chaotic, uncoordinated, and absolutely devastating in its unpredictability. Dominion point defense systems, calibrated for conventional attacks, struggled to track the sheer variety of incoming threats. Several enemy vessels staggered under the assault, their shields flickering as they tried to adapt to weapons they'd never encountered before. "Captain," Rodriguez called out, "we've got multiple Dominion ships breaking formation. They are pulling back to regroup." Sarah allowed herself a moment of fierce pride. Humanity might be outgunned, outmanned, and facing impossible odds, but they'd just accomplished something the Dominion clearly hadn't experienced in millennia. They'd been surprised. The real battle was just beginning. The Dominion's retaliation came with the fury of an empire that had never been defied. Sarah watched in horror as reality itself seemed to tear open around the human fleet. Enemy weapons didn't just destroy. They unmade things on a fundamental level, causing ships to collapse into dimensions that shouldn't exist. "We've lost the Prometheus, the Beijing, and the New Liberty," Rodriguez reported, his voice tight with grief. "Those aren't explosions, Captain. The ships are just gone." But humanity's response was equally savage in its creativity. The intelligence gathered by their nanites had revealed something crucial about Dominion technology. It was incredibly sophisticated but also rigid. Their systems were designed for efficiency and perfection, not adaptation. "Target the weak points in their shield matrices," Sarah ordered. "All weapons, continuous fire on those coordinates." The UES Defiance shuddered as it unleashed everything in its arsenal. But instead of standard military ordnance, Sarah's crew had loaded their weapons with the most chaotic mixture of projectiles ever assembled. Explosive rounds followed by ice fragments, energy beams mixed with clouds of metallic chaff, and kinetic projectiles that had been deliberately unbalanced to tumble unpredictably through space. Across the fleet, human ships were improvising in ways that would have horrified any military academy instructor. The cargo hauler New Horizon was literally throwing shipping containers filled with industrial waste at enemy vessels. The research ship Curiosity had weaponized its mineral analysis probes, turning scientific instruments into guided missiles. "Captain," her communications officer called out, "incoming transmission from one of the Dominion command ships." The crystalline being appeared again, but this time his perfect composure was cracked. Behind him, Sarah could see other aliens gesturing frantically at displays showing the chaotic battle. "What are you doing?" the being demanded. "This is not how civilized species conduct warfare. Your tactics violate every principle of organized combat. You fight without honor, without structure, without reason." Admiral Harrison's voice cut across the channel before Sarah could respond. "Honor? You threatened to genocide our entire species for the crime of leaving our home system. You want to see how humans fight when someone threatens everything we love? You're getting a front row seat." The transmission cut off, but Sarah could see the effect of Harrison's words rippling through the Dominion fleet. Their perfect formations were wavering as ships tried to adapt to human unpredictability. Some vessels were pulling back, others advancing aggressively, and a few seemed to be arguing among themselves based on the energy signatures her sensors were detecting. "Rodriguez, what's our fleet status?" "We've lost 4 to 7 ships, but we've damaged or destroyed over 200 enemy vessels. The Dominion is trying to reorganize their formation, but our continuous harassment is preventing effective coordination." Sarah felt a surge of fierce pride. Humanity was still vastly outnumbered, but they were making the Dominion pay for every human life with interest. More importantly, they were proving that the Empire's reputation for invincibility was built on millennia of facing species that fought conventionally. "Captain," her science officer shouted. "Multiple dimensional rifts opening throughout the enemy fleet. They are bringing in reinforcements." The tactical display erupted with new contacts as thousands more Dominion vessels poured through tiers and space-time. But these ships looked different, older, more ornate, with energy signatures that made Sarah's instruments scream warnings about unstable readings. "Those are their ancient war fleets." Admiral Harrison's voice came across the channel. "Ships they haven't used in millennia because no one has ever forced them to escalate this far." The new arrivals began firing immediately, but their weapons were different too. Instead of the surgical precision of the first wave, these ancient vessels used brute force that could shatter planets. Space itself caught fire around their hulls as they tapped into energies that existed before matter itself. "All ships, execute Omega Protocol," Harrison commanded. Sarah's blood ran cold. Omega Protocol was humanity's final contingency, the thing they'd hoped never to use. Every human vessel began converging on the center of the Dominion formation, abandoning all defensive positions in a desperate charge that could only end one way. "Captain," Rodriguez said quietly, "if we're doing this, I want you to know it's been an honor serving with you." Sarah looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. They were afraid, only a fool wouldn't be, but they were also determined. Each of them had volunteered for this mission, knowing they might not return. But they'd also known that sometimes making a stand was more important than survival. "The honor has been mine," she replied. "All weapons, continuous fire. Navigation, plot an intercept course with their command vessel. Engineering, prepare for emergency power transfer to shields." The Defiance accelerated toward the heart of the enemy formation, her guns blazing continuously. Around her, dozens of other human ships did the same, each one drawing fire from multiple Dominion vessels but refusing to break off their attack runs. "Captain," her communications officer yelled over the sound of alarms. "We're receiving transmission from across human space. Every colony, every station, every outpost is sending ships. The entire species is mobilizing." Sarah's heart soared even as a ship shook under enemy fire. The Dominion had made their greatest error yet. By threatening humanity with extinction, they'd united the species in a way that no political leader ever could have achieved. Every human settlement was sending whatever ships they had, regardless of whether those vessels were military or civilian. "How many?" she asked. Preliminary counts show over 50,000 vessels en route. Everything from military cruisers to mining barges to pleasure craft. They're all armed and heading for our position. The crystalline being appeared on screen one final time, and now Sarah could see genuine fear in its alien features. "Stop this madness," it demanded. "We can negotiate. The Dominion is willing to discuss revised boundaries, trade agreements, even limited expansion rights." This slaughter serves no purpose. Admiral Harrison's response came from the bridge of the Indomitable as it dove through a gap in the Dominion formation, its guns tearing apart everything in its path. You had your chance to negotiate. You chose intimidation instead. Now you get to learn what happens when you threaten a species that spent its entire evolutionary history refusing to go quietly into the night. The Indomitable's reactor went critical moments later, taking 3 Dominion command vessels with it in an explosion that lit up half the battlefield. Sarah gripped her command chair as the Defiance plunged deeper into the enemy formation. Whatever happened next, the galaxy would remember this day as the moment humanity announced its presence among the stars. The explosion of the Indomitable marked a turning point that nobody had anticipated. As Admiral Harrison's ship vaporized along with 3 Dominion command vessels, something extraordinary happened across the battlefield. The perfect coordination that had defined the Dominion fleet for millennia began to collapse. Sarah watched in amazement as enemy ships started breaking formation not in retreat, but in panic. Without their command structure, the various species that comprised the Dominion began reverting to their own tactical doctrines, many of which hadn't been used in thousands of years. "Captain," Rodriguez reported with wonder in his voice, "the enemy fleet is fragmenting. Some ships are trying to maintain the original formation, others are pulling back to defensive positions, and a few are actually advancing independently of the main force." But the chaos was just beginning. The 50,000 human vessels that had launched from colonies across known space were arriving in waves, and each group brought its own interpretation of how to fight the Dominion. Colonial defense forces used military precision, but mining consortiums improvised weapons from industrial equipment, while civilian volunteers did things that no sane tactical manual would ever recommend. The cargo freighter New Terra actually rammed the Dominion cruiser at full speed, its captain broadcasting human music at maximum volume until the moment of impact. A fleet of tourist ships from the Europa colonies had armed themselves with modified atmospheric processes, creating clouds of toxic gas that their environmental suit protected them from but that wreaked havoc on Dominion sensors. "This is impossible," Sarah heard one of the Dominion commanders broadcasting on an open channel. "How does a species coordinate without central command? Why do they continue fighting when victory is impossible? Their behavior defies every model of rational warfare." The answer came from an unexpected source. Captain Maria Santos of the mining vessel Asteroid Dream had somehow fought her way close enough to a Dominion ship to establish a communications link. "You want to know how we coordinate without central command?" Santos's voice crackled across the channel. "We don't. Every human out here is making their own decisions about how to fight and die. That's what you can't understand. We're not an army. We're 40 billion individuals who all independently decided that you picked the wrong species to threaten." The psychological impact on the Dominion forces was devastating. They'd built their empire on the assumption that all intelligent species would respond to threats logically, with self-preservation as a primary motivation. The idea that an entire civilization would choose almost certain death over submission was something their strategic thinking couldn't process. "Captain," Sarah's science officer called out, "I'm detecting massive energy fluctuations in the Dominion fleet. Something's happening to their command vessels." The answer became clear moments later as the largest Dominion ship, a vessel so massive it had its own gravitational field, began broadcasting on all frequencies. The being that appeared wasn't the crystalline figure they'd been dealing with. This creature was ancient beyond description, its form shifting between states of matter as if it existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "I am first among the Dominion," it announced, its voice carrying harmonics that made reality shiver. "I have witnessed the rise and fall of galaxies. I have seen species evolve from chemical soup to stellar engineers. In all my eons of existence, I have never encountered a phenomenon like humanity." The ancient being gestured, and the space around its ship began to twist. Sarah realized with horror that it was preparing to deploy weapons that could potentially destroy entire star systems. "Your species exhibit a pattern of behavior that threatens the fundamental order of the universe," the first continued. "You refuse to accept limitation. You reject authority. You choose destruction over submission. This cannot be allowed to spread to other species." But before the ancient weapon could fire, something unprecedented happened. Ships from the Dominion fleet began breaking ranks not to retreat, but to position themselves between the first vessel and the human forces. "What are they doing?" Rodriguez asked in confusion. Sarah's communications officer provided the answer. Captain, we're receiving transmission from multiple Dominion species. They're requesting permission to defect. The first message came from a group of reptilian beings whose ships had been fighting alongside the Dominion forces just minutes earlier. Human vessels. Their commander hears through the translator. We are the Vorth Collective. We have served the Dominion for 3,000 years, not from loyalty, but from fear. Your demonstration of defiance has shown us that resistance is possible. We request permission to join your fight. More messages followed in rapid succession. The crystalline beings who had first threatened humanity announced that their young generation had voted to break from Dominion rule. A species of energy-based life forms declared that they had grown tired of the Dominion's stagnant empire and wanted to experience the chaos of human-style freedom. Within minutes, nearly a quarter of the Dominion fleet had switched sides, their weapons now targeting their former allies. The perfectly organized empire was tearing itself apart from within. The first among the Dominion's response was apocalyptic. Its ancient weapon fired not at the human fleet, but at its own defecting ships, erasing them from existence with casual brutality. This is the price of rebellion, the first announced. All species will witness what happens to those who choose chaos over order. But the executions had the opposite effect. More Dominion ships began defecting, their crews apparently deciding that death in battle was preferable to life under a tyranny that would destroy them for thinking freely. Sarah realized that humanity had accomplished something remarkable. They hadn't just fought the Dominion, they'd inspired it to fight itself. The example of a species willing to die rather than submit had shattered the psychological foundations that held the Empire together. All human vessels, Sarah broadcast on an open channel. We came here to prove that some things are worth fighting for. Look around you. We're not just fighting for humanity anymore. We're fighting for every species that's ever dreamed of freedom. The battle was far from over, but its nature had fundamentally changed. This was no longer humanity versus the Dominion. It had become a war between two philosophies, one that believed in order through submission, and another that chose chaos over chains. The first among the Dominion prepared to unleash weapons that could crack planets, but now it faced not just human defiance, but a growing rebellion from within its own empire. The galaxy would never be the same. The final phase of the battle unfolded like the collapse of a star, slow at first, then catastrophically fast. The first among the Dominion's ancient weapons began tearing reality itself apart, creating zones where physics broke down and ships simply ceased to exist. But for every vessel it destroyed, 3 more defected from the Dominion ranks. Sarah watched in awe as the rebellion spread beyond the battlefield. Her communications officer was receiving reports from across the galaxy. Dominion worlds were declaring independence, enslaved species were rising up, and the empire that had ruled for millennia was fragmenting faster than anyone had imagined possible. Captain, Rodriguez reported, the first vessel is charging something massive. Energy readings are off the charts. If it fires that weapon, it could sterilize this entire sector, Sarah finished. All ships, maximum evasive, try to get behind some of the larger defector vessels. But the defector ships had a different plan. Led by the crystalline beings who had first delivered the Dominion's ultimatum, they began forming a protective barrier around the human fleet. Their commander's voice crackled across the channel. Humans, the being said, we were ordered to deliver a message of submission. Instead, you taught us the meaning of dignity. We will not allow the first to destroy what you have created here. The ancient weapon fired, but instead of striking the human fleet, it hit the wall of defector ships. The explosion consumed dozens of vessels, but their sacrifice bought precious time for everyone else to escape the weapon's range. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face as she watched beings she'd been fighting minutes earlier die to protect humanity and the ideals they'd come to represent. This was no longer about territorial disputes or species dominance. It had become a war for the soul of the galaxy. All remaining Dominion forces, the first broadcast, its voice carrying rage that made space itself tremble, witnessed the cost of rebellion. I will unmake every star system that harbors these ideas. I will erase entire species from existence rather than allow this chaos to spread. But the first had made a critical error. Its threats weren't breaking the rebellion, they were fueling it. Across the battlefield, even loyal Dominion ships began to waver as they realized a master would destroy them too if they showed any sign of independent thought. Captain Santos of the mining vessel Asteroid Dream somehow managed to break through to a general channel. Her ship badly damaged, but still fighting. You want to know what makes humans different? She broadcast to the entire fleet. We learned a long time ago that some things are worse than death. Living on your knees is one of them. Watching your children grow up as slaves is another. Every human out here made the same choice our ancestors made when they faced extinction. We decided to go down swinging. Her words sparked something extraordinary. Human ships across the battlefield began broadcasting their own messages, not to the Dominion, but to the species fighting alongside them. A young ensign from the colony ship Prometheus transmitted a simple message. Freedom isn't something you're given, it's something you take. The captain of a mining consortium vessel added, "We're not fighting to win. We're fighting so our children will know their parents never surrendered." Dozens of other voices joined in, each sharing their own reason for being there. Gradually, the defector species began responding with their own messages, stories of oppression, dreams of independence, hopes for their young that had been crushed under Dominion rule for generations. The psychological effect was devastating to remaining Dominion loyalists. They'd been told they were maintaining peace and order, but the voices around them spoke of liberation and hope. The Empire's moral authority crumbled with each transmitted word. The first response was to begin targeting the source of these transmissions. But destroying ships only made their final messages more powerful. The captain of the research vessel Curiosity transmitted her last words as her ship disintegrated. "We came to the stars to learn. Today we taught the galaxy that freedom is worth dying for." Sarah realized that humanity had won something more valuable than a military victory. They'd won an ideological one. The Dominion could destroy every human ship in the fleet, but they couldn't destroy the ideas those ships had brought to the galaxy. "Captain," her science officer reported with excitement, "massive dimensional rifts opening throughout Dominion space. I'm reading thousands of ships emerging, but they are not Dominion vessels. These are species we've never seen before." The answer came from an elderly voice that somehow reached every ship in the battle simultaneously. "We are the remnant," the voice announced. "Species that fled Dominion expansion millennia ago rather than submit to their rule. We have watched from the galactic rim as the Empire grew, waiting for the day when someone would prove that resistance was possible. That day has come." The remnant fleet was unlike anything Sarah had ever seen. Ships that looked grown rather than built, vessels that seemed to be made of crystallized music, craft that existed partially in normal space and partially in dimensions that human science couldn't name. They'd spent thousands of years developing in isolation, and their technology was as advanced as the Dominion's but utterly different in philosophy. The first among the Dominion found itself facing not just a human rebellion, but a galaxy-wide uprising that it had inadvertently created by threatening to destroy all who opposed it. "This ends here," the first declared, beginning to charge a weapon that Sarah's instrument suggested could destroy the local star system. "I will reduce this entire region to cosmic dust rather than allow this chaos to spread further." But the weapon never fired. A small, damaged human vessel, the courier ship Terror's Dream with a crew of just 3, had somehow penetrated the first defenses. Its captain transmitted a final message as the ship's reactor went critical. "This is Captain James Wright, formerly of Earth. I want my daughter to know that her father died free." The explosion wasn't large enough to destroy the first massive vessel, but it was perfectly positioned to disrupt the ancient weapon at the moment of firing. The feedback tore through the ship's systems, and for the first time in eons, the first among the Dominion found itself vulnerable. The combined fleet, human, defector, and remnant vessels, didn't hesitate. Thousands of ships converged on the wounded giant, their weapons creating a light show that could be seen from neighboring star systems. When the firing stopped, the first ship was gone. With it died not just an ancient being, but an entire philosophy of rule through fear and intimidation. Sarah looked around the battlefield at the mixed fleet of species that had somehow come together in the space of a single battle. Ships from dozens of different civilizations floated together, their crews probably trying to figure out what came next. "Captain," Rodriguez said quietly, "we're receiving a transmission from Earth. They want to know if we need reinforcements." Sarah laughed, the sound carrying both exhaustion and exhilaration. "Tell them we're fine, but they might want to prepare for company. I think we're about to have a lot of new neighbors." The Galactic Dominion was dead, destroyed not by superior firepower, but by the simple human refusal to accept that freedom was impossible. In its place, something new was being born, a chaotic, unpredictable alliance of species united not by fear, but by the shared belief that some things were worth fighting for. Humanity had come to the stars seeking new worlds to explore. Instead, they'd found something far more valuable, allies who shared their unwillingness to bow to tyranny no matter the cost. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly what humanity had been hoping for all along.